The wrong train, nobody survives. It always begins the same way, with something so ordinary that nobody would ever expect terror to be hiding there. Daniel was an exhausted man, his life consumed by the relentless hum of deadlines, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the slow suffocation of routines. That night, his office clock blinked past midnight when he finally left, his tie loosened, his briefcase feeling heavier than usual, his footsteps echoing through streets that seemed unnaturally empty. The subway entrance yawned before him like a tunnel to nowhere, the kind of place that smelled of rust, mold, and the faint metallic temps of rain dripping from pipes. He had ridden these trains countless times, but the station felt off, hollow, like the air itself was holding its breath. Only one other person was there, an old janitor sweeping with deliberate slowness, his back bent, eyes down. Daniel tried to ask him if trains were still running, but the man never answered, never even lifted his head, just kept sweeping the same patch of cracked tiles, over and over. Then the sound came, not the usual rumble of approaching wheels, but something deeper, grinding, like stone dragged against stone. The wrong train, nobody survives, pulled into the station, its headlights cutting through the darkness, not with white beams, but with a sickly yellow glow that looked more like eyes than lamps. The destination sign flickered with broken letters, rearranging themselves into unreadable shapes that looked ancient, almost carved rather than digital. The doors opened with a hiss that felt like a whisper, and Daniel, desperate to get home, stepped inside without thinking. The instant his shoes hit the floor, he felt it. The train was colder than the night outside, and the doors slammed shut like a trap. At first, it seemed empty. Rows of faded blue seats, windows blackened by tunnels outside. No conductor, no announcements. Daniel sat down and tried to tell himself he was imagining things, that this was just some late-night maintenance train. But the silence was wrong. A subway never sounded like this. There were no clatters of rail, no hum of electricity, just the steady, pulsing throb of something alive, as though the train itself had a heartbeat. He tried checking his phone, but the screen glitched with static, letters twisting into unfamiliar alphabets. When the lights flickered, just for a second, there was someone sitting across from him. A man in a long black coat, head bowed, face hidden. Daniel blinked and the seat was empty again. His pulse quickened. He told himself he was tired, hallucinating maybe, but then the flicker happened again, and this time there were two passengers, pale-faced, eyes cloudy white, sitting perfectly still like mannequins. He looked how I squeezed his eyes shut, but when the train jolted, and the lights flashed once more, there were five, all of them facing him, all of them breathing, slow and shallow, as if The wrong train, nobody survives, was filling up, not with the living, but with something else. Daniel's chest tightened as he realized the walls of the train seemed to stretch, the windows warping, showing not tunnels but endless black landscapes dotted with faint figures walking, thousands of them, dragging themselves in silence along invisible tracks. He pressed his hand to the glass, but it was like touching ice. Tene heard a whisper, faint but clear. You're already late. Daniel stood, panic overtaking him, and stumbled toward the doors, but there were no emergency handles, no exit signs, nothing familiar at all. Just smooth metal walls and rows of lifeless passengers who seemed to multiply with every flicker of light. He tried yelling, pounding on the doors, but his voice was swallowed as if the train itself absorbed sound. That was when he noticed the details. Newspapers on the seats, crumpled and yellowed, all with dates decades old. Shoes scattered beneath the benches, different styles, different eras, some tiny, belonging to children. The smell of mildew grew stronger, mixed with something sharper, like iron. The wrong train, nobody survives, carried relics of everyone who had ever boarded. He thought about the janitor, sweeping endlessly. Was he a warning? A survivor who never left the station? But then the whispers grew louder, overlapping, dozens of voices pressing against his skull. They weren't random. They were speaking his name, Spoon Arhund. And for the first time, one of the pale passengers moved, its head snapped toward him. Eyes to wide jaw, unhinging with a slow crack. It whispered again, "Sit down." Daniel froze as the rest began to stir, their movements jerky, puppet-like, as if controlled by unseen strings. They didn't blink, they didn't breathe in rhythm, but they all stared at him. He backed away until his shoulders hit the door. His heart pounded, his throat dry, and then, for the first time since boarding, the train slowed. The station outside was nothing Daniel recognized. It wasn't his city. It wasn't any place that belonged to the living. The platform stretched into darkness, lined with figures waiting, not people. Shadows, hundreds of them, frozen like statues, heads tilted toward the train. Their arms hung too long, fingers touching the ground, their bodies swaying slightly as though blown by a wind Daniel couldn't feel. The train doors opened with a groan, and every shadow lifted its head. They didn't rush in, they didn't move. They simply waited, staring. Daniel hesitated, trembling, every muscle screaming to run, but when he turned back to the seats, his blood ran cold. He was already sitting down. His reflection in the window stared back at him, pale, hollow-eyed, no longer human. He tried to lift his hand, but the reflection didn't move. It just smiled, a wide, unnatural grin. Panic consumed him, his thoughts spiraling, but his body didn't respond. He realized the horrible truth. He wasn't controlling himself anymore. He was another passenger, another victim claimed by the wrong train. Nobody survives. And outside, the shadows began to board. Their forms seeped through the doors like smoke, filling the carriage, merging with the passengers, their whispers growing into a deafening chorus. Each word burrowed into his skull. Forever. 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 The lights flickered violently, and in the strobing flashes, Daniel saw faces, hundreds, maybe thousands, pressed against the windows, screaming silently, clawing to get out, their skin peeling, their eyes hollow. All of them had boarded this train once. All of them had never left. He was only the latest. The ride didn't end. Time dissolved. Minutes felt like hours. Hours like years. Daniel's mind stretched thin, caught between memories of his life and the suffocating presence of the train. He thought of his apartment, his mother's voice on the phone, the warmth of sunlight he'd taken for granted. But those memories were fading, being overwritten by the hum of the train, the whispers of passengers, the endless tunnels outside. The wrong train nobody survives wasn't just a course, it was a cycle. Every victim became part of the train, feeding it, luring in the next lost soul who stepped aboard. He saw flashes of others before him, a schoolgirl clutching her books, a soldier in uniform, a mother holding a child, all of them now passengers. All of them whispering. The shadows fed on fear, on despair, binding every rider tighter to the endless journey. And deep within the walls, Daniel felt something larger, ancient, pulsing with hunger. The train wasn't just haunted. It was alive. A parasite feeding on humanity's late-night mistakes, thriving on the weary, the careless, the ones who thought one wrong train was nothing to fear. His body rocked gently with the motion, his reflection smiling wider as the truth set in. He wasn't leaving. He wasn't meant to. Nobody ever does, because this wasn't transport. It was a trap, a vessel for eternity. And with every stop, it waited patiently for the next passenger who thought they were just going home. So if you ever find yourself at a lonely station past midnight and a train arrives that shouldn't be there, with headlights that glow like sickly eyes and a signboard that flickers with nonsense, stand to step inside. Don't listen to the hiss of the doors or the whisper that says, "You're late." Because if you do, you'll find yourself sitting with Daniel and the others, watching your reflection smile without you. This was the story of the wrong train. Nobody survives. A nightmare that feeds on the ordinary moments of our lives, waiting in the places we trust the most. And if you think this tale is just another urban legend, then ask yourself this. Why do some trains get reported missing from records, never accounted for again? Why do certain platforms feel colder than the rest? Why do we sometimes swear we see someone in the window of an empty carriage? If you dare to keep traveling with us, click here. Not for safety, not for comfort, but for the next descent into darkness. A story where even shadows won't protect you, and the tracks themselves lead somewhere worse than hell.